gonna be just like senior year, except for funner.
Hi, everyone. So we have a special episode for you this week. Before we dive into the movie, we had the chance to chat with the incredible Damona Hoffman about her work as a dating coach, her take on the rom-com genre, and of course, the Julia Roberts classic that's this week's focus, My Best Friend's Wedding. Enjoy!
Hey everyone, I'm Kendra.
And I'm Mercedes, and we're so excited to be chatting today with Damona Hoffman.
Yes, about everything from her life as a dating coach to her take on My Best Friend's Wedding.
Yes, welcome, Damona.
We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I get to talk about my favorite rom-com. I get to talk to my favorite ladies from the Rom-Com Room. Hi, thank you for having me.
I know, this is going to be fun. Let's jump right into it. I feel like obviously we have a lot of questions about you as a dating coach because that is huge. And I know when we last spoke, you were talking a little bit about how you are a cynic when it comes to love. And I'm curious, is being a dating coach kind of what brought you out of that mindset? And what is it about coaching people that fulfills you?
Yes, I should clarify, I was a cynic. I think I said I am a cynic, but I was a cynic. I'm no longer a cynic. I'm cautiously optimistic about love. No, I'm very optimistic about love, actually. And there's a rom-com for you. That's me. I will not be doing this all. But I really, as a dating coach, I've seen the ups and downs that people go through in their road to find love. And I've seen it. I've also lived it. And prior to meeting my husband, I swear to you, I didn't think this guy existed. In fact, for like the first 6 months to a year of dating, I used to tell him that I made him up and he didn't really exist. And maybe I'd seen My Best Friend's Wedding too many times. The ending there. But I just didn't know what was really possible for me because I think I had been influenced by a lot of rom-coms and a lot of love stories and a lot of fairy tales that were like, love's supposed to happen like this. And then when it doesn't happen the way that you envision in your mind, then that's when the disappointment and the frustration comes in. And so I've really made it my life's work actually to help people who are in that place that I once was and give them optimism, but also practicality of how they can design their roadmap to find a real relationship and not just one that they read about in stories.
Absolutely.
I love it. So did the passion for this work come from falling in love, or did it come from like the trials and tribulations of your own dating life?
It came from falling into this line of work, honestly, because I met my husband online. I was not intending to be a dating coach. I actually was a casting director for television, and I loved working in, comedy, romantic comedies. I did a lot of TV movies. And I was teaching classes for actors and how to market themselves way before anyone was talking about personal branding, anything. This is like before social media, before anyone had a concept of like I as a person and presenting myself in a way that people are going to perceive me differently than I may feel internally. And so I was teaching actors how to pick headshots that would tell their story, that would stand out from a crowd. And at the same time, I was online dating. And you know how that story goes. Basically, the dating apps and the profile photos were the same thing that I would tell actors in how to stand out to someone that they wanted to meet. And so after I met my husband online, then people would come to me and say, well, how'd you meet that guy? He's pretty great. Remember, I made him up. And they would say, well, show me how you did it. Like, what's your secret? And that's really when I realized what I had been doing the whole time was applying those techniques that I'd learned in work about personal branding to online dating. So initially I started just writing profiles for friends and for family. And then it wasn't until I started getting phone calls like, I met someone, I'm getting married, I'm having a baby. And I was like, wait, this is a job. This is a skill set that I can share and help enhance people's lives.
100%.
I love that.
Yeah.
Honestly, it feels like my dating profiles are always best when I get my friends to consult on them anyway, because they just know you through a different light. They see how you're presenting to the world more than like your internalized what ifs when you're building your profile.
Completely. And I will tell you, most profiles, when I read them, polish them, work with a client, the first like 2 sentences usually I can just scrap. I can just strike that because it's like all of our insecurities and all of our worries that we lead with. And I'm like, no, 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 lead with the thing that will attract that person. And you have to stand out right away. So just going back to my casting days,
Mm.
I literally would get a stack of like hundreds of headshots for every role. And you needed not necessarily to be the most talented actor, you needed to market yourself in the right way for me to go through those pictures, just like swiping an app now. I would just go through those pictures like, oh, this person looks interesting. Then let me see what they're about. And that's really akin to the primary photo on your dating profile. It's that first photo that makes someone go, wait, I'm going to stop scrolling for a second and see what is this person about?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I feel like as someone who is chronically single, I get a lot of advice from people who met their significant others on dating apps being like, well, you can't look for it. And it's like, but dude, you were on a dating app. You're clearly a part of you was looking for it. And I feel like there's just a lot of caveats when it comes to love. But like with that being said, I want to dig into your own personal love story. So I have heard your story on the podcast, The Moment, where you and Seth will talk about like how you first met. But I'm curious, you guys have been together for a while, your anniversary is coming up. Is there one single moment with your husband that you wish you could experience for the first time again? And what would it be?
Oh, that's such a sweet question. Wow. The first moment I could experience again. Honestly, this is corny, but my wedding. I I set the intention with my wedding as like, this is going to be the best day of my life. We now have 2 kids. And so I'm obligated to say the day they were born is the best day of my life. But between us, my
Between us, we
wedding.
will talk about
I'm like, there's mom. I said this to my daughter the other day. I was like, there was mom and dad before there was you. And she's like, no, there wasn't.
it.
That's right. There was Damona and Seth. We were our individual people. We weren't mom and dad. But I set the intention, and I know we're going to talk about weddings in a little bit. And we talked about weddings on my podcast, Dates and Mates. When I set the intention for the wedding, it was about the experience that I wanted myself, that I wanted to have, and the memory I was creating, and the experience of the people who attended the wedding. I was like, I want everybody to say, that was the most fun wedding I have ever been to.
Mm.
And I really feel like we achieved that. And I had to kick those mofos out at the end of the night. I was like, yeah, you're costing me money. Let's wrap it up.
You don't have to go home, but you gotta get the hell up out of here.
Right? Exactly. So that was just a really special moment. And just
Yeah.
to know that it just unfolded so differently than any relationship I'd had previously. And it unfolded so differently than anything I had seen in the movies. I know you keep saying chronically single, you're chronically single. I can't wait, Kendra, for you to come in my program and for me to switch it all up.
Yeah.
But I just want to dispute what your friends are saying, that it won't happen when you look for it. In my experience, and I've been coaching people on dating for over 15 years,
Mhm.
that is just patently false. And I
Thank
feel like that is a rom-com belief. Like,
Thank you.
and then it'll just magically happen.
Yeah.
I see that when people come to finding love with intentionality, which I actually
Mhm.
did before I met my husband. I did this whole dating plan for myself. When
Mhm.
people approach it with intentionality, that's when things unfold differently. It's not magic, it's strategy.
Yeah.
Actually.
I feel like people just say this stuff and they have no idea where it's coming from, but because it's been regurgitated so many times, they just think that that's the correct advice, and it's not. It really isn't.
You two know where it's coming from. You know exactly where it's coming from,
Exactly.
right? And
Speaking-
it matters. It's like
Yeah.
the media we consume matters.
Exactly. And back to rom-coms, like we've discussed that you're not the biggest fan, but I do want to know more specifics, like your likes and dislikes of the genre. More of your dislikes, because I'm more curious about that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just allergic to anything corny, sappy, romantic.
Mhm.
That's the thing. I'm not a cynic about love. I'm just non-romantic. Like I just don't like even in my life. I'm
pragmatic.
just like, oh, that just feels. My daughter would say that's cringy. Like, cringy. So I don't like that, but I like real moments. And I like that when films infuse a sense of growth. I believe that relationships are a mirror, and your partner can illuminate your biggest flaws and also highlight your biggest strengths. And I love that in a movie when you can see the growth in someone through the people that they're relating to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And leads me to my next question. I mean, obviously you're here because Mercedes and I love rom-coms. And as a dating coach, I'm sure that they impact your line of work a lot. And I'm just curious, if you had to pick one rom-com character that was most similar to you, who would it be?
It's funny because I would have said Jules from My Best Friend's Wedding.
I would have had a problem, Damona. We would have had to have a conversation.
We are going to have a conversation. I did relate. No, honestly, I don't know if you would classify this movie as a rom-com. I kind of do. I'm definitely Cher from Clueless because, right? She always was, even though she was in the mix, she was always a little bit on the outskirts. Like she never quite fit in with the other high school kids. That was definitely my experience. I always felt older. I always dated older guys. And I always was like, I'm with you, but I kind of never, I have a very multicultural background and I've just been a little bit on the periphery of every community that I'm in a way. But I feel like that vantage point allows me to live in many worlds, but also to kind of observe many worlds. And I feel like Cher does that. And I love that she is kind of playing matchmaker as well.
Yes.
Do you classify that as a rom-com?
Definitely, because it's based on Emma, the novel. So, and that's a rom-com. So I totally think it's a rom-com.
The Jane Austen one.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that. That is Mercedes teaches me something new every single week, Damona. I kid you not. She's like my textbook for everything.
Oh my God. I love all of the like classic reboots. And then like 10 Things I Hate About You is actually Shakespeare. It's actually Taming of the Shrew, right?
Yeah. And it just turned 25. The movie just turned 25 yesterday. So, and it's so major still. Like people still love it.
And I'm turning 25. That's so weird.
Yeah.
No, I was squarely like, I remember 10 Things I Hate About You coming out. But I loved it. That's one thing I love about rom-coms. And by the way, we didn't mention my husband is actually a television writer. So he writes stories for a living. And we also are both fans of classical, drama and classical writers as well. And so I love when a story can be reinvented for a new generation. And I think there's something in a lot of these foundational stories. I mean, I work a lot with my clients on like, let's take stock of what happened in prior generations, what stories and inputs are so under the surface of our consciousness, but are impacting our actions and relationships. Just take notice of it and then figure out what can you apply to your life today, what still fits and what might need to be rewritten. It's always time for a reboot, right?
Oh, always. As a dating coach, how often do rom-coms actually come up in your sessions with clients?
Not specifically a lot, but you know what comes up a lot? Actually, reality TV. Like people will be like, "Oh, I saw this on The Bachelor or Love Is Blind."
I think we should be using Love Is Blind for anything. I'm just gonna say that.
Really? Oh my God, I love it. I love social experiment reality. I was gonna say we shouldn't be using The Bachelor, but that's a whole other Bachelor in Paradise. Nah.
Oh my God.
Exes on the
What about
beach.
Love Island? Oh,
F-Boy Island. Yeah, all that is really doing a number on us. But it is fun. It is fun to watch and to get invested in the stories. I think that's ultimately what we're all searching for, a happy ending. If not for ourselves, for the stories that we're watching. Like we want to see what happens. We want to see romance unfold. So that's why we keep watching.
So speaking of romance, I want to talk about My Best Friend's Wedding for a second because that's what we're all here to discuss, right?
yes.
I feel like Mercedes and I have had this conversation before. You really like this movie, right, Mercedes?
I love it.
You love it. I cannot stand it personally. I think it's like it.
Then I
drives me crazy.
I picked the right movie then. That's perfect.
You did absolutely, because I have a lot of thoughts. And so we like to do this segment on our show, which you're familiar with, called Couples Therapy, where we offer dating advice for the couples in the movie on how they can improve their relationship, which of course you as a dating coach are used to. And so I would love for us to just focus on Julia, Cameron Diaz's character, Maroney, Michael, Kimmy. I'm like trying to remember everyone's names. Julia, Michael, and Kimmy. So Kimmy is played by Cameron Diaz. Michael is played by Dermot Mulroney. Am I saying that right?
Yeah,
Dermot.
got it.
Dermot.
Yeah.
And then Julia obviously is played by Julia Roberts.
Uh,
And so, well, Mercedes, I want to hear your thoughts first about what you have to.
What I love about this movie, and I mentioned this on your podcast, Damona, how it's the story of two cowards. And this is what happens when two people who are afraid to be vulnerable with each other. Dermot Mulroney's character is afraid of getting hurt again by Julia Roberts' character, who's afraid of being vulnerable ever. So she really never lets her walls down. And this is the product of that. So he goes with the safest option. I don't think he's really in love with Cameron Diaz, but he's going to go with her because he knows it's less pain than confessing his love to Julia Roberts and then it not translating back to him. So that's what I love about it. I also just love that it kind of puts all the cinematic fantasy of a rom-com into an almost like realistic way of like, okay, this is what these antics would look like in real life, and they do not translate well, and they're not going to go over well for you. And even if you're chasing somebody down through a city, it's not really going to work out for you if you're too late anyway. And that's what I love about it. Like, it's kind of just giving you a lesson on timing, and you need to be honest.
But I think maybe one of the things I didn't like about this movie is I would like it so much more if they made Kim a villain. If they made her unlikable, or just some sort of Meredith Blake type character from The Parent Trap, right? Just someone really unlikable.
Julia Roberts is supposed to be the villain. Like, she's just hands down the villain.
I know, but it's hard for me to root for villains, right? Like we just did an episode on Pitch Perfect this week, and we were talking about the main character Becca and how she's just such an unlikely protagonist. And I feel like it's the same with Jules. She's just an unlikely protagonist. I'm not rooting for you to ruin someone's marriage, especially if the other person is like super likable. Like, Kimmy's really endearing. You could tell a lot of her personality just comes from her being young and ignorant and kind of not knowing about the world, but just operating off of love. Like, I just love, like, you know, when you're in that age, you're just like, love is the only thing that you need. And then you get older and you realize that's not necessarily the truth. Damona, I know you can speak on that. And so I feel like I can't, it's hard for me when movies derive from that kind of classic formula, especially rom-coms. It's really hard for me to root for who the creators, the filmmakers want us to root for. And I just couldn't root for Jules because I was like, you had 9 years, my dude. You had 9 years to tell this man that you loved him, and you were waiting until he's happy and he's in a good place in his life and he's met an amazing woman to do it. And I can't agree with that.
See, that's why I love the movie. Because I don't think there is a villain. And it is such an anti-rom-com because it is real. Like Mercedes was saying, like that I could see a piece of myself in all of those characters. And she doesn't make the right choices. And that's what I love about it, that you see how those wrong choices play out for Jules. And I don't think that Jules and Michael actually are in love. I don't think there was that risk of like, I'm actually in love with her, because they would have gone together if they really had that connection. They had a friend connection. And just because of time, you're going to put a clock on it that if you're still single by 28, you're going to get married to this person that you don't have a romantic passion for. And then you're going to convince yourself that you need to chase them down and break up their marriage because you weren't feeling it, but you don't want to be left on the sidelines.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just encapsulates like the whole, my passion for it. But like, to Kimmy, who's kind of she's actually so charming and likable. This is the Cameron Diaz character. And even in spite of all of Jules's antics, like she can't lose. But when you step back and look at it, like, she's about to give up her career. Like, she's was going for a successful career, I think, as an architect, and she's going to leave it all behind to support Michael?
Yeah.
And I was like, as a dating coach, first of all, just know she's 20. She's 20 years old.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm just like, girl, you're going to regret this later. And
Yeah.
for the other two, I think it's just like, it wasn't right for them to be together, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Kimberly is the right choice either for
Mhm. Yeah.
Michael.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quote that Kimmy says where she says, he has you on a pedestal, but I'm on his arm. And I'm always curious because I don't actually know which is better, like being admired from afar or wondering if you settled for something that's not necessarily like a big love. So,
Somewhere
yeah, I always
in
think about that.
between, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Mhm.
I thank you for bringing that quote though. I always love that quote too. You should not be putting your partner on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And you like in a way, I've said this to my husband, like both of us feel like we're the lucky ones, but I don't put him on a pedestal. I see him as human. And I think that's a really important element of relationships and something that a lot of rom-coms forget.
Yeah.
And that's why I love
definitely.
there's so much humanity in these two delightfully flawed characters.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I would say if I had to give advice for all three, so for Julia, I would just say be brave, be bold, but timing too, right? I wish she would tap into, I wish she had sat down and analyzed her wants and her needs and her feelings before all of this happened so as not to sabotage someone else's happy moment. For Michael, I feel like he needs to make a list. I've always heard this from a very young age to make a list of the person that you want most in life. Like your not necessarily like a dream person, but like your ideal person. Because in relationships, what people tend to do is with the more that they date other people, the next person that they date, they just compare them to the person they were with before and not necessarily what they want. And they think because this person is better than who I was with before, they must be good for me. And I feel like Michael needs to sit down and make a list of exactly who he wants and go out and find that person. And then with Kimmy, I just feel like you are absolutely right, Damona. She's incredibly charming because of her age and because she's so ignorant. But also, too, like she needs to make decisions as well. Like, what kind of life do you want to live? And who do you want to live it with? Who do you want to be? Because it's at the age of 20 that we start asking ourselves those things as we, we're graduating from college and we're going out into the real world. We have to ask ourselves those hard questions. And I don't think you should be getting married until you have those tough conversations with yourself.
Yeah,
So
and you're
that's
gonna ask
why.
those questions again at 30, and you're gonna ask them again at 40. But that's great advice. And the next time I'm hiring a coach for my company, I'm gonna bring you aboard because that's
Yeah.
actually the foundation of all of my coaching programs. I start with mindset. Mindset is both who you are, what you bring to the table in a relationship, and what you want and need and value in a partner. And when you have clarity on that, it shifts the whole process of finding love, and then you're not second guessing. Because, this whole movie, Jules is second guessing her decision not to marry Michael for the last, whatever, 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can have conviction in your choice. And it's funny because also in college, I had like a best friend that was kind of like my Michael. And when I tell you there was no physical attraction. Like, I could look at him and be like, "He's an attractive guy," but, like, he was my bestie,
Yeah.
and there was nothing at all romantic on it. Like, my mom loved him. She was even like, "Maybe you could marry him," and I'm like, "I'm not interested." And so when I watched this movie, I would think about him and think, like, there's no way that I would ever put that, like, well, if I get to 28 and we're not married, that then he would become the right choice for me when he wasn't for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
28 is so young too. Every time I hear their deal for 28, I'm like, because usually you hear that they're like, oh, when I'm 40 and if we're not married at 40, this will happen. But every time I watch it and I hear 28 again, I'm like, oh my gosh.
This
But you
did come out 25 years ago.
I was about to say 28
Yeah.
was old back then because everyone was getting married in the early 20s. So like you were an old maid if you were 28 and not married.
Well, yeah, the age of marriage has actually been increasing dramatically. It was pretty static for many years, like up until the 1970s. It was pretty much the same. And
Mhm.
every decade since then, especially in the last 10 years, the marriage age has jumped up at a really steady clip. And there's just so much in there to unpack as to why. But I think it's interesting.
Millennials. That's why.
Well, I think dating apps is a big part of that.
Definitely.
Not actually, as most people would think, like negatively. I think it actually gave us the possibility of finding people who were beyond our social circle and better match for us, and not just out
Yeah.
of convenience. Jules and Michael,
Yes.
but actually allowed us to go out into the world and find somebody. And sometimes that takes a little bit more time. But I also think it's correlated with feminism, and correlated with women gaining more earning power and not having to just choose at 20 years old this guy who had a reliable career, even though apparently
Mhm.
Michael's career wasn't all that anyway. But we could carve our own path ourselves. And I do wonder, if this movie was today, I don't think Kimmy would be giving up her architecture career to
Not
No.
for a second.
settle for Michael's career. And like, can they have both? Like, can Michael just
Exactly.
support Kimmy on her
Mhm.
career, and they can be a power couple? That's what we want in 2022.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I'm curious too, Damona. I don't know how much you incorporate love languages into your coaching, but if you had to kind of decide each character's love language, what would you say they are?
Okay, so recently, actually, on Dates and Mates, I just discovered that the love languages, they're not, for me, the best language to use, because it was actually developed in the 80s based on Christian married couples. So the way that we apply today, the gifts and the acts of service, isn't actually how they were originally studied or intended. So I just want to be careful in assigning. I know there's been like a resurgence in love languages, but I've had a big epiphany, and I'm starting to shift to a more modern framework for it. But what I love is that it does give us an understanding of how we give and receive love, which I think is
Mhm.
something that
Mhm.
for a long time people weren't talking about. So wait, your original question is, what are their love languages?
Yeah, I'm curious if you had to assign them a love language, or like how they give love or how they receive love. How would you describe them?
Yeah.
See, I'm gonna rewrite. I'm gonna write new love languages.
Let's do it. Let's do
Do
it. Yo,
it.
this is the Rom-Com Room. We could do whatever we want.
Yeah, we do whatever in here.
Thank you. In my mind, I think Jules is the attention-seeking love language. She really needs to feel seen and valued. And maybe she's an acts of service person. But I don't know. I think she really, like, it was really important to her to like be chosen to be in the wedding, and to have that place of focus
Mhm.
for a lot of the movie. And gosh, for Michael, I think it's probably that he also just he needs to be adored. So maybe his is like a physical touch, but I think it's also an emotional adoration as well.
Yeah.
And for Kimmy, I think her love language, it has to be something more romantic. Like, it's more the idea, I think, of Michael than it is the reality. So I just
Definitely.
rewrote the love languages for you. Those are not
Love it.
clinically studied or anything.
Love it. The
They're
Damona Hoffman love
profound.
languages. So we also like to talk about if the couple lasts for 5 years, but obviously there are two scenarios here, right? So if Jules and Michael do get together, do you think they last 5 years? And Michael and Kim, who actually did get married, do you see them lasting in 5 years?
Okay, so is this in the context of 25 years ago when this movie came out, or in the
That's-
context of today? I know.
I know, because that changes a lot, huh?
It does. Because I think in the time, I think Kimmy and Michael stayed together.
Yeah.
I think Kimmy popped out a couple kids within the first 3 years. She probably had 2 kids. And then she was like, I'm in it. And that was her choice. And that's how that's how she wanted to live her life.
Yeah.
That was the most important to her. And then at 40, then she realizes that, like, oh my gosh, my architecture
Yeah.
career. And then she goes back to school. And then maybe, but in the short term, everything was all good. And her husband's all cute and all that. So she was happy at the PTA meetings because they're like, you have the cute husband. You should see some of these people that the other girls from college met and married. I think the question is, if Jules and Michael were to get married instead.
Yeah. Do
Oh,
you
that
think
wouldn't
they
have
last 5
lasted.
years?
No, that wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes.
Yep.
I don't even know. They would have annulled it right away and been like,
100%
what are
agree.
we doing? Because they weren't they didn't have the attraction. That's such an important element. Like,
Mhm.
you can go down this list and be like, these are all the qualities I need. This is what I value. But
Mhm.
the reason that I tell my clients to practice slow love and to just go through the process of being led by curiosity and getting to know someone is that as you get to know someone deeper, a deeper level of attraction should unfold. And they knew each other pretty darn well. And that level of attraction didn't develop, which means it wasn't right. It wasn't
Mhm.
there. And, Jules is a snake anyway. I guess she is the
They
villain. Now that I'm
I
talking,
think they're both the villain, though. I think he's also a villain.
uh, yeah.
And yeah, I think they both have villainous qualities, which is what makes this movie so great. But I also, they have such a physical chemistry together, like the scene with the ring
That
where
was so sensual.
it's crazy. He takes the ring off her finger with his mouth. Oh my God. Just thinking about it, I'm like, whoa, and
Yeah.
so much. So I think that also blurs their judgment a lot. So they perceive it as like way more than it is, even though they don't really know each other on any romantic level, besides like one hookup, which really doesn't say much when it was 10 years ago.
Sure doesn't.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Oh, all right, guys. I feel like just to wrap it up, let's talk about what are some aspects of the movie that make you a fan, or do you have a memorable scene or something that has happened that you really like in the movie? I feel like I really like Jules' friend, her gay best friend.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
I was going to
Yeah.
say the same thing.
Amazing.
Anyone who is interested in musicals, that you are my person. So the fact that he just like belts out singing the song at dinner, I love that scene.
I love the scene at the end where he calls her on the phone, right? And then he's across the room and he's like, radiant with charisma. And he's so dang cute. I was also like my other best friend wedding. We're always, musical person. We're always the gay friends. So he would totally be my friend.
Mhm. Same.
Love it. Mercedes, how about you?
My favorite scene is when they're on the ferry together and you see this moment and I'm like, you're like, this is gonna be the moment they're gonna confess their love, and they're just looking at each other and it's so intense. You're at the edge of your seat and then silence. Nothing
Yep.
happens. They just don't let themselves say anything. And I'm like, these are cowards. These are two cowards who any ounce of care they have for each other just is just under like layers of fear.
100%. Oh gosh. It's a lot.
Such a great movie. I love
So
it.
good.
Have we convinced you to maybe see it through a different prism?
I'm gonna say yes because I love you, Damona. I'm gonna say yes. I don't want you to feel like
Convincing.
your time in the rom-com
Convincing.
room was wasted. I learned a lot. I did learn a lot, and I feel like my perception has changed. So thank you both. Like I'm always open to learning new things about love. So
Just a new perspective.
your new perspective. Thank you. Well, Damona, thank you so much for joining us. We were so happy to have you here.
I always have fun with you two. I wish you continued success with the Rom-Com Room, and I hope you'll come back to Dates and Mates again.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you
Love it.
so much for joining us. We were so happy to have you here. Hey guys, I'm Kendra.
Hi, I'm Mercedes, and this week we're talking about one of the most iconic anti-heroines in My Best Friend's Wedding.
My best friend's wedding. I just always have to sing everything after you say it. Because the way that you say it makes me want to sing. But of course, before we jump in, listeners, we got to talk about our celebrity crush of the week. Mercedes, tell all of us, who are you crushing on this week?
Oh wow. Okay. Nikesh Patel. He plays Tom Kapoor in the rom-com TV show Starstruck. You can watch it on HBO Max. It was created by Rose Matafeo. And I'm in love with him. It's a travesty because he's walking this earth in love with somebody else, and I'm just here watching him. If you watched the remake of Four Weddings and a Funeral, he's in that too. He's just gorgeous.
Okay.
I love him.
You said a bunch of words that I have no idea what they mean. What is Starstruck? Who is the Cash? Who is
Yeah.
Rose? Like, okay, so give me like the premise of Starstruck. Did you watch all of it already?
Yes, there's 2
Okay.
seasons out. It's 6-episode seasons because it's like BBC. But so she's just like a normal gal. She's a New Zealand girl living in London.
Mhm.
And on New Year's Eve, she meets this guy. They go home together. The morning after, she finds out he's actually like, she realizes that he's like an action movie star, like big star. And then the whole first season's a very big will they, won't they. And then the second season kind of turns into like what happens when they do.
like become a like boyfriend and girlfriend. So it's cute, it's fun. It's like it fuels all those fanfic needs, you know? All like
Okay.
celebrity normie
Could
needs.
you imagine like waking up next morning and like The Rock is sleeping next to you?
I mean, I think I would just be like, how did I get here? It was The Rock.
That's so funny. Okay, well, like I said, listeners, you guys know this. Every single thing that you suggest to me, Mercedes, I watch. I do. I watched
I'm so
the
happy.
second season of Bridgerton after you were like, it is amazing. And so that is my crush of the week, actually. I have a girl crush on this week. And whenever I do a girl crush, it's mostly like I want to acknowledge women who I feel like are killing it, and that's why they're my
Yeah.
girl crush of the week. But Simone Ashley, who
Oh my
plays Kate
gosh.
from Bridgerton, is my crush of the week. I just feel like, first of all, this girl's absolutely stunning. She
Yeah,
is
perfect face.
blindingly stunning. And when I
Mhm.
first saw her, I was like, she looks familiar, but I literally couldn't put my finger on it. And I remembered she plays the popular girl in Sex Ed, which I love
Yeah.
that show. I haven't seen the third season yet, but I love the show, and I've watched the first and second season multiple times. And I just feel like if Netflix likes you, like they like you. And so we're gonna be seeing a lot more of her, and I'm excited for that. I really do hope this is her big blow up moment that, like, okay, so for example, Daisy Edgar Jones just had this too. She killed it in Normal People. Now I'm seeing her every single trailer
Everywhere.
for a new movie. She is in it. And I want that for Simone Ashley. So
I love Simone.
big
I'm
up
right
to
there
her.
with you. She's amazing.
Exactly. Okay, so man, sorry, struck to my list. Got it. Got it. All right, listeners, we're going to move right on into TLDR. We just like to recap the movie for anyone who hasn't seen it. If you have not seen My Best Friend's Wedding, it is currently streaming on Netflix, I think until April 30th, actually.
Hmm.
So you can watch it there. Okay, we're gonna dive right in because I got a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
So Jules, played by the effortlessly beautiful Julia Roberts, and Michael, played by the object of every one of my desires, I stole that from Bridgerton, Dermot Mulroney, have been friends since college. Even though they didn't start out that way, they were best friends, and then they were like friends with benefits for a month before Jules decided to just drop the benefits and just remain friends. So during dinner with her close friend George, who's played by Rupert Everett, we learn Michael is getting married. Jules decides right then and there that she loves Michael and she's going to do whatever she can to win him over. And I feel like that just proves to be really difficult because when she arrives in Chicago and meets Michael's fiance, Kim, played by Cameron Diaz, she just so happens to be like the sweetest, most innocent, and a little bit naive girl. And it's just so hard not to love her as an audience member. But of course, Jules manages not to love her. She goes to great lengths throughout the entire film to try to sabotage their relationship, from trying to pit Kim and Michael against each other to even sending a scrupulous email to try to thwart Michael's career. And she never ceases efforts, even when she starts to get to know Kim's family, and she's constantly challenged by George and questioned on her actions. Finally, Jules expresses her feelings and kisses Michael, which, of course, there wouldn't be any like drama in this rom-com if Kim didn't see it. Of course, she sees it. This leads to a wild chase across the entire city of Chicago, ending up in Union Station, where Jules finally accepts Michael is actually in love with Kim. And after finally admitting defeat and having a big blowout with Kim, all is mended and Michael and Kim finally get married with Jules' blessing. So this is a 1997 film written by Ronald Bass, who you may know from iconic films like Rain Man, What Dreams May Come, and the cult classic How Stella Got Her Groove Back.
Mhm.
It's also directed by PJ Hogan, who also directed Peter Pan. Shout out Jeremy Sumter, he was my childhood crush, and Confessions of a Shopaholic. All right, Mercedes, you got a lot of interesting facts for me, and I'm excited to hear about them.
I do. A lot of mine are revolving around the character of George. And yeah, he's Jules's editor and he's just the best. Like he wasn't even really supposed to be a major character originally, but after screen tests, the audience really was frustrated with Jules and didn't understand her motives naturally. That's
That was me.
so valid. And so they added George in more, and he really acts as her conscience and grounds her throughout the movie and really calling her out, being honest, but also is really caring and supportive and ends the movie as like her comfort and support that she needs. Like truly like her best friend love by the end.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
I think it's cute. I do like the ending. There's a quote in the end that's one of my favorites. But something I found really interesting was Drew Barrymore actually read for the role of Kim, but Julia Roberts handpicked both Cameron Diaz and Dermot Mulroney for this film. Can you imagine having so much power that you're like, nope, I want these people to cast, and then you just like make someone's career? That
That would
is
be amazing.
that is power that I desire to have.
And this was like the first of many Julia Roberts Dermot Mulroney movies. And they're besties. So like I love seeing like they have such good on-screen chemistry. It's brilliant.
You know what blows my mind? All of these big people from the era, so like George Clooney, Brad Pitt. I was looking at how old they are. They're only in like their late 50s.
Yeah, they
Like
started
I
so young.
Yeah, it's so crazy because I feel like in my 20s, because I'm about to, so my birthday isn't exactly a month. And I feel like as I approach 30, that whole mindset of like, oh, you're so much older than me is like just dwindling. It's just dwindling. There comes an age where it all just kind of muddles together. Anyways, I say this because Dermot Mulroney is only 58, and I'm like, hello. So
Shoot your shot. Shoot your shot where you can.
Right.
Okay. Did you also know that the original screenplay had a different ending? So that ending we love with George was actually supposed to be John Corbett, who we know as Aiden on Sex and the City and My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Mhm.
He's supposed to ask Jules to dance at the reception when she's sitting there heartbroken. But
Mhm.
people were so upset with that ending during the screen test because they were
Rightfully
like,
so.
why is she getting off so easy? Like, she just had the craziest villainous time here. And now she's being rewarded with like a hottie.
Yep.
Not fair. So then Hogan and Bass changed it to George, calling her on the phone and then like surprising her.
Mhm.
And I just like the audience really melted for it. And I don't know, I always like cry at the end because I think it's so special.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That best friend love is very special. It's
Mhm.
very, very sweet. Have you seen the movie Maid of Honor,
Yeah.
starring Patrick Dempsey and Michelle Monaghan?
Yeah.
So it's so funny because that film is meant to be a gender reverse of this film, and I
Mhm.
never put two and two together. I think it's because Hollywood recycles so many storylines that it just all becomes muddled. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
duh! Like it was intentionally supposed to be like the gender reverse of this film, and I thought that was really interesting.
I feel like Patrick Dempsey like can't be a villain though, you know? Like it's harder for him. Like he doesn't just have the
Yeah.
juice. He needs to be like charming all the time and like
Yeah.
sweet, you know?
And he just like has this innocent look in his face too that just makes it really hard to not love it.
Exactly. You're like, okay,
Yeah,
maybe
even in
that's fine.
Valentine's Day when he was kind of the villain, like when we did our episode on Valentine's Day,
True.
like I
True.
still was like, "Hi."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You got
Oh
anything
my
else for me?
goodness. Yeah, I have one more
Okay.
thing about
Okay.
Cameron Diaz. So
Mhm.
I saw in the film's reunion with People Mag a few years ago, she said that the karaoke scene was so traumatizing for her that now she still like hates doing karaoke.
Oh.
It was actually like her fear up there. She was like, I was acting, but I was also feeling everything that Kimmy was feeling.
Really?
And Dermot was like actually like the most supportive person on set that day. And like the way he's looking at her was it was like a very raw, authentic moment for both of them, which
Yeah.
is so it adds so much to that. I love it.
I want him to look at me that way.
Same.
That is so cool. All right, guys, we're gonna move straight on into Time Capsule. Mercedes and I just like to recall what we were doing, where we were at the time this movie came out. And it's so funny because I don't remember when I first watched this movie, but I remember the first time I ever saw Julia Roberts. And I tell this story all the time because it essentially changed the course of my life
Oh
and
my
like the
gosh.
projection of my life. I know
Oh
that's
my
so
goodness.
dramatic. I know that's so dramatic, but like here's the story. Okay. So it was around the time that this movie came out, 1997. I was like 5-ish years old, 4 or 5
Okay.
years old. And I just remember I've watched the Oscars every year since I was 4. And this year was the very first year I did not watch the Oscars, like since I was
Wow.
essentially born. I know. But I remember seeing Julia Roberts in either a black or a dark colored dress on stage and just thinking she was the absolute most glamorous thing I've ever seen. And I want to do exactly what she's doing. And I decided right then and there that whatever she did, because I didn't know her, I didn't have the like concept to understand who she
Yeah.
was. I was like, I want to do whatever she does. And I think of her as like, oh yeah, she's an actress. So that's when I immediately started taking acting classes. I did like all of the plays at my church. I did theater all through school. I did musical theater all through high school. Like I even went to modeling school for a little bit.
Wow.
And that's like what made me study film in college was just like my love for being in front of the camera. Because when I was thinking about what I wanted to major in college, I was like, okay, I know what goes on in front of the camera. I want to know what goes on behind the camera. So that's why I studied film. And I just feel like Julia Roberts is one of the people that made me fall in love with film. And so, iconic moment.
Kendra, I love that so much. Oh, it's so amazing how like when you're young, those certain things you just see it on TV and you're like, that's it. That's
That's
for
it.
me.
That's it. I
I
can't
was
tell you
doing
how many
Spy
times.
Kids.
I'm also very impressionable sometimes. Like, especially as a kid, I was super impressionable. Like,
Oh, same.
anything I saw, I was like, I want that.
Yeah, and they look so cool up there, glamorous. Of course you
Mhm.
want to be her. You're like, yes,
Yeah.
I want to wear the big dresses and get the
Yeah.
awards.
And like have people like clap and just like have George Clooney give me double cheek kisses. I want that.
Love
Where were
that
you, Mercedes?
story.
What were you
So
doing?
I was a year and a half. I was a literal baby.
Oh,
But
Lord.
I am a major Julia Roberts fan because of my mom. But this is actually not one of my mom's favorite Julia Roberts movies. So I didn't really watch it as often as like Stepmom. Like I was the kid in
Mhm.
preschool bringing the VHS of Stepmom to daycare.
Yeah.
Like that was me. I was like, let's watch this. Everyone's like, that's not appropriate. But there it was. And yeah, so I loved it. So I think for this movie, I watched it in bits and pieces on TV, like just anytime that it would play, but I wasn't really watching it like on my own, like I do with a lot of other Julia Roberts movies or just like any other rom-com. But then
Mhm.
I do remember like the most memorable time I watched it was on a plane. I was like 20 or 21. And
Mhm.
I was sobbing so hard at
Oh
this
my
movie.
gosh.
Like, and I don't know, I think the plane movies really get you because you're just like in a capsule
Oh yeah.
focused. Like you have nothing else. And this was a long flight. I think this was like
Mhm.
from London or something. So I'm on there for like 10 hours. And then I was sobbing that the person next to me was like, "Are you okay? Like, are you gonna be okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be fine." It was hitting hard.
That's so
And I really fell in love with it then.
yeah, you know what? Okay, I think it's being on airplane, you're just like encompassed in
Yes.
your emotions. Because I watched the movie Gifted with Chris Evans on a plane.
Oh my
I
God, yeah.
bawled my eyes out the entire time. And I don't even know if it's really that emotional of a movie or if I was just my emotions were heightened because I was like 30,000 feet in the air. I was
Exactly.
bawling. The people next to me were like, "What is?" And I don't like really cry at movies like that, so it's a whole thing. It leaves an impact on you. It really does.
It does. All the airplane movies are so memorable.
They really are. I feel like okay, even though I don't remember like when I first saw this movie, I do remember being 5, which was the age that this movie came out, because I was either in preschool or about to enter first grade. If I was in preschool, I was having a ball, Mercedes. Literally all we
Ooh.
did, I went to like a Methodist preschool. All we did was sing songs, play outside, and nap.
Oh,
We literally that's all we did, and then my dad would come pick me up at, like, 12 PM and take me to Burger King, and this is very weird, but this I remember the very first time I had a hamburger, and it was around this time because I was so scared of it, I thought it was so big and it couldn't fit in my mouth, that's what she said, and I was very, very scared of it.
Kendra, not when you're telling a story about young you.
I know. And I feel like I have a terrible sense of humor. I remember my dad suggesting that I get ketchup on it because at that time I put ketchup on everything and I did that literally well into my 20s.
Love
And
that.
still to this day, ketchup is the only thing I get on my hamburgers.
You don't get like a cheeseburger or anything?
No, I just get ketchup and onions sometimes too. But yeah, I because of that moment, I don't ever get like pickles or
Wow.
mustard or lettuce, nothing. Just ketchup and onions.
Wow.
I know, I know.
I don't even know. I'm like thrown.
Do you remember anything from this time period? I mean, obviously not because you're 1.5, but I'm curious if your parents ever told you stories of like how you were during then.
I mean, all my stories were like, Mercedes' first word was no. So like you knew like my attitude at a very young age.
They knew
And I
you
would
were
just
gonna
be
be
like,
sassy.
no, exactly.
I love that. I love
But
that.
yeah, I don't remember a lot. But I will say, every time I rewatch this movie, my crush is on Dermot Mulroney just grows and grows and grows.
Yes.
And then I have to rewatch season 1 of New Girl because he plays this DILF, and you're like, hello, fancy man? I'm in love with you?
He still
Yeah.
looks good. But he was yeah, I love The Wedding Date. That's my favorite Dermot Mulroney movie.
That's a
He's
good one.
he's so good. There's a scene where he like holds Deborah Messing, and I just love the way that he's holding her. It's so sweet. All right, guys, we're gonna skip on over to the Rom-Com Hall of Fame.
Yes.
But we have to talk about A Rose Mercedes. I know you love this movie. If you haven't picked it up yet, listeners, I do not. And so I feel like we got quite a few things to roast, and I just want to say first of all, this whole movie is kind of a roast for me. The fact that Jules is so manipulative and conniving for no freaking reason, essentially. Like, if I was Kim, I would have punched her in her perfect nose. And Julie Roberts has a perfect face. I would have punched her in her perfect face.
Yeah.
I just feel like she had, what was it, 8 or 9 years to say something and just never did. And now that someone has finally found happiness, she's like, I'm gonna ruin it for my own personal gain. And I just felt like that was really selfish. And if I was Michael, I don't know if I would have been as forgiving as he was. I just feel like, when you're in a friendship, how do you come back from something like that? And I'm actually asking you, is like, as like when you're in a friendship and like someone tries to completely ruin your happiness, how do you come back from that?
I mean, my take on them is that they are just in love. Like they are in love, and even though he married Kimmy, he's in love. And so I don't know. I definitely wouldn't come back from it. I don't think I'd ever put myself in that position though.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. You look at the character of Jules, and I feel like I know myself well enough to be like, I would never do something like that. But also, I look at Kimmy, and I'm like, I also think I would never be as naive as she was. you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's 20.
Mhm.
And I mean, Julia Roberts is just supposed to be the villain. And that's what
Yeah.
makes this movie so juicy for me, is
Mhm.
that she is the villain. But I have a lot of roasts too.
Yeah, yeah, go for it. Go for it. Let's hear it.
Well, the first one, I mean, obviously, to everyone out there, if you can watch the movie, so white.
Snow White. Not white, it's
Just
white.
just like when they're all singing, I love when they break out into song. But you're looking at that restaurant and I'm like, hello?
Yep.
Anyone anyone
This is
around?
Chicago. This is Chicago, dude. What are you doing?
Exactly. That's what happened. That's what Chicago, I think, plays its own character in this movie too, because they're running around the city, and I love a movie that does that and like plays with the city. But when you're in a big city like this, like, come on, like,
Yeah.
let's really be honest with ourselves and like be realistic of like, if we're gonna portray a city, let's portray a city.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know?
You're 100% right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my major roast.
I feel you. Okay, another one I have. So we all know that scene where Jules tells Michael that her and George are engaged. And
Yeah.
I just feel like forcing your gay friend to quote unquote act straight is just so cringe, especially like that's such a detriment to someone's mental health, especially if they've been in the closet for a long time and they've just like recently come out, which I don't know George's story, but just like
He's
forcing.
he's like in a serious relationship in this.
Okay, okay. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
I didn't remember that. But I just feel like forcing someone to act against who they are is just very,
Oh
very
yeah.
cringe. Very cringe.
I definitely agree with you. I mean, this movie does play with like the stereotype of the gay best friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it started that trope though? Or
No,
had we
I
seen it
think that I think we've probably seen that before.
before? Okay.
And I don't think it elevated it, but it certainly didn't, like, it wasn't revolutionary in the way that George was portrayed. But we do see like some glimpses into his life. So he's not just like a caricature for Jules, which I appreciate. Like, we see him at that book reading when he's on the phone. We see him at like a dinner with other people. So we see that he has like a life that's not just Jules, which
Yeah.
I like, because the worst is when you see the like marginalized best friend as just like the voice of reason for
Mhm.
the main white lead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear you. I hear you on that. You got another roast? You got another
Yeah,
roast? You
I
want
mean,
back?
I think like another critique I have is really just about the characters. Across the board, we have amazing performances. Like, obviously, these core four actors make this movie. Like,
Mhm.
without them and their talents, this would have been a flop, I think.
100%.
But I would love to see the details of these characters more. Like, why do Jules and Kimmy love Michael? Besides the fact that he is Dermot Mulroney,
Yeah.
like, why do they love him? Like, anytime that Michael's about to like end it with Kimmy, Kimmy's like crying on her hands and knees for him, and I'm
Mhm.
like, what is that? What is really the
Yeah.
draw here? Like, I understand these characters have great chemistry, and that's all in the acting really for this movie. And I would love to have seen what these characters were on paper and like
Mhm.
the depth, because the depth really is through the actors, not really through like the actual making of these characters and their arc, you know?
You are so observant, Mercedes, and I'm always impressed by how you dissect the movies that we talk about, because that is so true, and that didn't even cross my mind. That is so true. Like, I think about all the things that Michael said and his actions, and it was really like I wasn't even listening to his words. I was just staring at his face. Like, that's why I
Yeah,
love him as a character, is because
exactly.
he's very good looking. But yeah, there's really no. I mean, maybe they find it admirable that he's really passionate about a career that doesn't pay him a lot of money. It could be admirable. It could also be a cop out too. So, I mean, there are. I feel like there are things that we could nitpick, but you are absolutely right, and I think that's really interesting. And when we're talking about the characters and just like lack of depth, I think of Kim because she is so naive, but I also feel like a roast for me is just asking a complete stranger to be your maid of honor. Like,
Oh
why
yeah.
don't you have friends, Kim? And I just
Yes.
feel like people who get married who don't have any friends, like that's a huge red flag. I couldn't marry someone who just doesn't have any friends. It's like it's just we're the you spend all of your
I
time with
couldn't
me.
do it either. Like
Yeah.
you need a full life outside
Mhm.
of your partner.
100%. And also too, having a life outside of your partner gives you like just depth as a person. How do I get to know you intimately and deeper if you don't have anything in your life,
Hmm.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she's so young. Also, like, I don't know. I'm a firm believer in like don't get married until the frontal lobe in your brain is fully developed. like,
What
like
age is
she's
that?
so
Wait,
young.
what age is that?
25.
25. Okay, got it. Got it.
She's so young. And I know Jules is a pick me girl. Like she literally says pick me, choose me. I know
Yeah.
that. But and like I think that's something to love about her because it's so heart-wrenching and honest and she's finally being honest. And
Mhm.
uh, this is less a roast. I mean, the roast is that Jules is a pick me girl, but really like I this is more of a love too because I love that Kimmy, even though she's young, she's never the ditzy fiance and she's never the evil fiance. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which like
Exactly.
when you're going into it, you're like expected to root for Julia Roberts as like, okay, we're gonna get this guy back. Like he's with a bad girl. You're like ready to go at the beginning. You're like, this is a 90s movie. I know what to do. We're gonna villainize another woman. And then you get
100%.
into exactly. And then you get there and you're like, oh no, I know who the villain is. It's Julia Roberts. And like, I just love that Kimmy, she's naive and she's young, but she's dynamic. And I just like really appreciate that it's so different than so many others. And this movie does not let the leads off the hook for infidelity and like the
Mhm.
crazy wild antics just for
Mhm.
love. Like, oh, do it for love. It's like, no, actually chasing somebody around a city and kissing them at on their wedding day is actually
Yeah.
not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
like and it brings humanity back to Kimmy's character. And
Mhm.
she's not just the fiance, and we don't just let everyone off the hook for being like, "Oh, well, it wasn't the right person." So even though it's your wedding day, bye, you
You
know?
know what's so funny, Mercedes? Like, we obviously love rom-coms and we appreciate
Yeah.
the art behind them so much, but they do kind of enable bad behavior
Yeah.
sometimes. And I think that's why, I like this movie for that reason that okay, it's not justified in the end. Like you don't get everything that you want in the end. But also it's just the fact that it happened, it allowed it to happen in the first place, right?
Mhm.
Like that's what really gets me. I feel like there are a lot of like cringe moments like that in rom-coms that just like allow bad behavior. Like the
Yeah.
whole, a lot of it has to do with like infidelity or like even like waiting last minute or just like never telling someone how you feel and all of
Mhm.
these things. But
Or
yeah,
telling
I feel
people
like
to stay when they wanna leave.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I feel like, as people who love rom-coms, we are able to critique it in this way because when you love
Totally.
something, you want the best for it and you want it to be better. And
Exactly.
I feel like that's the direction we're moving in the future.
Yeah, and, like, we can hold 2 thoughts at once, we're human, like, we
Yeah.
can love something and also see the problems with it, especially because a lot of these movies are, like, decades older than us,
Yep.
you know?
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of Kimmy, she does not have one of my favorite quotes, but one of my favorite quotes was inspired by her in this movie. So it's a scene where Michael and Jules are on the ferry, and he says,
Kimmy says if you love someone, you say it. You say it right then, out loud. Otherwise, the moment just
Passes you by.
passes you by.
Cut to me sobbing.
Right?
I cry. And then you know when it pans to the rest of the people on the ferry and it's those 2 little girls watching them dance? Oh, I'm sick. I'm sick in the head for how much I love this movie.
Yeah, if anything was gonna happen, it was gonna be in that scene. It
Exactly.
didn't happen. So I feel like that kind of it was a big tell for how the rest of the film was gonna.
Cowards. They're
Yeah.
all cowards.
What's your favorite quote?
I have two favorite quotes. My first one is the cousins who are the other bridesmaids when Julia Roberts makes her klutzy entrance into their like banquet luncheon or whatever, and she's falling out the elevator, and they're like,
My God, it's the bride and the woman she'll never live up to.
"Hello."
What?
Yeah, you're like, whoa, and they just say it out loud, and everyone's like,
Yeah. Like they did just say that. What?
crazy. And I love that line because I was like, wow, that really like speaks to the whole movie. And then my other favorite line is,
I didn't have to hate her, I'd adore her.
which is what Jules says about Kimmy. And I think that just speaks to this movie because she sees how good Kimmy is as a person, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's really good. Like she doesn't just hate her to hate her. Like she hates her because she's like, you're with the man I want. But she's also like so frustrated because she knows that she's a good one.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, so the age-old question, Mercedes here. Would you, if this movie popped up on your Tinder feed, would you swipe left or would you swipe right?
I'm swiping right forever. This movie challenges the rom-com genre, audience expectations. It's revolutionary to me. You have the rom-com leading lady of the 90s not get the guy, and instead she's flawed and conniving, and you still empathize with her at the end. Like you still feel her hurt and just unrequitedness. And after being vulnerable, and you see her like jump through these hoops, and you see her be clumsy and like the sing-songs of like the classic rom-com tropes, but I don't know, it doesn't celebrate Jules's behavior or reward it. All of her antics backfire. Nothing works for her. And we know she's the villain. Michael's also the villain. He is. Like you don't take a ring off that finger and like that. I don't know. I just love that this movie ends with such an unexpected finale, you know, for Michael and Jules. And it ends, like I've said, with Jules and her like biggest friendship love, which is George. And that's so relatable. And I think it also, like, her fears of rejection are actualized. So we see her character arc. She finally lets herself be, and she's fun and she's okay. She's coping and she's hurt, but she's alive, which I think a lot of people should look at for being vulnerable, especially me. Like you're gonna be okay. And then it ends with just dancing with her bestie, you know? And of course I'm gonna swipe right.
Oh, all right. So you know I love you, Mercedes. You know you're my partner. I just disagree.
Exactly.
But that's okay. I'm swiping left on this movie just because we all know I have a hard time disassociating characters with actors and like myself and characters and all this stuff. But I think that's why I love movies so much. I love rom-com so much is because I'm able to put myself in the shoes of these people. And I just feel like if I'm putting myself in Kim's shoes, because I know myself and I know my character, I could never do what Jules did, and I could never stand for it if I was Kim. Even if this is my best friend marrying the love of my life, Dermot Kennedy, I would feel some type of way. And I would feel so betrayed and so angry. And I don't even know if I would move forward with my wedding, to be honest, because all trust is kind of out the window. And I think the biggest pet peeve of mine in this movie is just the timing.
Yeah.
It's all just the timing. If Jules did exactly what she did, like tried to get Michael before he was like, hey, I'm happy and I'm getting married and this is what's happening in my life, would have been totally fine. But it's just, why now after all this time? And that's something that I just cannot let go of on my heart. So I'm swiping left on this movie.
Sorry, but do you think if you related to any character, it'd be like George because he's such a good friend?
No, because while I feel like George grounded her, I don't feel like he actually ever prevented her to the lengths that I feel like I would go if my friend was trying to do this, you know?
I don't know. He tells her when he's leaving for the airport, he's like, he's gonna choose Kimmy and you're gonna be the maid of honor and then you're gonna go home alone.
Yeah.
And I think like he tells us the rest of the movie. And I think that's so crazy because so many people graze over it and they're like, yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's just like in like all of the phone calls in the beginning and just her even going out and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because like you love the people in your life who are your friends. They're your friends for a reason. Like you love them. They mesh onto your life. But I just don't. I also don't know if I have any friends who would do this too. Like, that's a whole other thing, right? It's like the character of
Yeah.
my friends and who I choose to surround myself with. Do I surround myself with people who would like try so hard to ruin someone else's happiness? I don't know if I have friends like that. It's hard for me, Mercedes. It's a good question, but it's hard for me to understand, to really get deep down there. But I think this is a perfect segue for couples therapy where we could talk about how the characters can improve their relationships and improve themselves. And so I'd love to hear what you have to say first, though, Mercedes, because
I
I got
yeah.
a lot.
My whole thing with this movie is that, like, and I'll say it over and over again, this movie proves that love just isn't enough sometimes. And it can't be enough because in romantic relationships, they're complicated and you need to be brave and you need to be honest and you need to be vulnerable. And Jules and Michael are two cowards who are in love and scared to say it, and neither of them are brave. And they're just not brave enough to say it. So they fail, and the moment passes them by, just like on the ferry. And like, of course it does, because they're afraid to say it. And Jules would rather cause destruction than admit her feelings even to herself. And George really has to like ask her the question, like, do you really love him or is this just about winning? And really calls her out for that. And I love that because he's telling her, like, you're afraid of being vulnerable and being honest. And he tells her that it won't end in her favor. And she's so selfish and self-sabotaging, but she's also so charming. And I know she's an anti-hero. And that's the whole point of this. And I love seeing her raw emotions by the end when she finally opens up, like at the gazebo. I don't know, like it's the moment you like don't want to happen for Kimmy's sake, but then you do want it to happen because you're like, just say what you need to say and like, come on, get it over with already.
Yeah.
And like, you should have acted sooner. Like she should have, like you said, like the timing is so frustrating. And like, that's the whole point of her failure here. It's like, you should have said this years ago if you felt it, And I think I'm glad that she doesn't win. She doesn't win in the end, So. And that makes me happy. Like, I think seeing her failure is just such an honest depiction of what would happen if this was going to happen. Michael's fear of being heartbroken is probably the most frustrating thing about him. Like, he wants to be loved and he wants to be chosen and he wants to be wanted. And he finds all those things in Kimmy because she's young and she really has him on a pedestal the way that he has Jules on a pedestal. I don't think he's in love with her. I think he has love for her because Kimmy doesn't challenge Michael in any real way. Like, she's so young and she doesn't really know what she wants either. Like, she's still in college and is dropping out of college for him. And she's non-threatening. And even though she's endearing, like, I mean, he gets away with a lot of stuff because of her. And anytime things go wrong, they don't even talk to each other. Like, what is that? They have Jules be a moderator at that dinner. She's crying and then they hug it out. And then, like, even at the wedding venue, Jules is walking back and forth between them, being like, I'm Jello, you're creme brulee. Like, no one's actually having like a real conversation. And then Michael doesn't even do anything until Kimmy's like, we'll do whatever you want, And that's so frustrating.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yes, there's so much. That's why these characters are just so dynamic that I could go on and on. I mean, it's not even really couples there. Like, I'm not giving them any tips. I'm just like, these are the things you're doing wrong.
Okay, I will give them some tips then. I think both characters have a lot of maturing to do before committing to anyone, let alone themselves. Like, even Michael and Jules, before committing to themselves, they have a lot of maturing to do. So have you seen that list of like 100 questions that you're meant to ask your partner before you get married? Have you ever seen
Yeah.
those? Yeah, I read those all the time. Not because I'm about to get married or I even have a partner, but just because I think those questions are very important. They're very intriguing and I think they're very stimulating as well. And I just know that Michael and Kimmy did not talk about a single one of the questions on that list. Like,
Do those questions scare you when you read that? Like, when I read some of them, I'm like, no, absolutely not.
No, they don't, because so there's this book that I've read like 3 times now called Loving Your Husband Before You Even Have One. And it kind of goes over all of those. And I read that book with my ex. And so we did talk about pretty much all of those questions that were on that list. And I think it's scary if you just don't know the answer. Yeah. But I mean, I've had time to think. So but I get it. Some of those questions are very intimidating, but I do also feel like they're intimidating because they are meant to help you set the foundation for building a whole life together, for longevity, which is what, I think the end result that people want in marriage most of the time. And I feel like if you read those questions, they require just a modicum of self-awareness, which I feel like no one has in this movie, and Jules especially. I don't think she could give you an honest answer for why she's behaving the way that she is. So let's say she gets Michael in the end, right? Then what? Like, what happens? Because
Yeah.
it just seems like Jules is the exact opposite of what he wants in a relationship. And it just, for a relationship to work, it requires time, it requires compromise, and it requires sacrifice, which even with Michael's job, he's kind of made clear that he's not willing to do. Like, he's not willing
Mhm.
to compromise or sacrifice. And then, like, Kimmy leaving her senior year of college, which is arguably the best year of college, like, just for a guy, like,
Crazy.
and no offense to Michael or anything, I admire his passion for his job, but like you're leaving college for a guy who can't even financially support you and take care of you. Like
Yeah.
it's just so much ignorance that you can miss me with all of that. I just there's so much maturing that needs to happen for all of these characters, and I don't know if we ever get that. I don't know if we
Yeah.
ever get that.
And we
So
need honesty from them, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like no one is really being true to themselves or to the people that they care about.
Mm-hmm.
And like also the fact that Michael waits 3 days before his wedding to tell Jules he's engaged. That's not the move. That is villain. That's villain behavior. That is villain behavior. And all the comments when when she's getting the dress, the maid of honor dress, and he's like, "Oh, you look good," when she's just like in her underwear, and I'm like, so, "You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing." And knock it off. And then I'll say it again: the ring, taking off the ring you're giving to another woman off another woman's finger with your mouth is villain behavior.
Mercedes.
The
I
chemistry. Oh my God.
I just want to say when he did that. So obviously, if we're talking about love languages, I think Michael's is physical touch because when he
Oh,
takes his ring off of his
definitely.
with his mouth, I thought I was pregnant. I literally thought I was pregnant.
That's
It's like
the best response. Best one.
it's so intimate. It's so sexy. Like the way that he's just maintaining eye contact with her the whole time. I couldn't. I had to look away. I was like, I can't handle this right now.
Like at that point they hadn't even like that the fact that they had more chemistry there than like, in the kiss. Like
Mhm.
that just shows like the pull and just like
Yeah.
the gravitation they have to each other. Like they really are magnets. I totally
Yeah.
agree with you. Like physical touch is all Michael. And like oh my God, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it is very beautiful. Uh, But I feel like for Jules, her love language, like how she gives it us through acts of service. Like I just
Mhm.
think of this movie is just a whole story of everything that she does like physically to try to get him back. And if that does not scream acts of service, I don't know what does.
Definitely. I also think that she's a little bit of words of affirmation once she gets to a vulnerable spot. Like, because even the way, like, at in the baseball bathroom, when her and Kimmy are finally having it out, she
Mhm.
tells her and, like, is honest, like, really honest with her. And she's finally like, okay. And even, like, yeah, once she's able to, like, express herself with her words, she knows what to say and she knows how to
Yeah.
say the right thing.
Hmm. I agree. I agree. But as we know, in the end, it's Michael and Kimmy who end up together. So if we're thinking about longevity, do you feel like Michael and Kimmy last in 5 years?
No. Oh, wait. Yes. Sorry.
Which
I
is
have
which is it?
I say yes, but I don't think they last much longer than 10 years. I think
Okay.
10 years is their max. Kimmy will grow to resent Michael and all the things she gave up. And she'll grow into herself and be like, nope, we need to stop this. We need to make a change here. And on the ferry, when Jules is joking about their like twice a year affairs they'll have once he's
Yeah.
married, I feel like that's actually a prophecy.
Yeah.
Like in my head, their story's not over yet. And Michael and Jules will get together at some point. Like there's just too much love there.
Yeah.
And it can't come at that moment, obviously. It's just like the timing thing. And I don't know if it's healthy love there, but I think there's love there. You know what I mean? And I think they might come together after like a mutual divorce of Kimmy and Michael, or it might be some of those like twice a year affairs. But I just think he's in love with Jules and Jules is clearly in love with him. And I know Jules is flaky and that's why Michael like won't like be with her now. Like, she's flaky in love, she's not reliable, she's emotionally avoidant, and his biggest fear is like really trusting somebody who's not going to be reliable for him.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and I think after like a little more emotional development, they could get there.
Yep. Maturity. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I agree with you though. I don't think that Kimmy and Michael last like longer than 10 years. I just feel
Yeah.
like they do have the type of marriage that where they get divorced in their 40s. And especially if
Yeah.
we're considering the time that this took place, like in the 90s, right? I feel like that was silly early. You're like, no, we're just gonna stay
They'd be
married.
getting divorced like right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel like either of them are equipped with the tools needed for marriage. And they won't find that out until way later,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But it is something that everyone must find out. Like, do you have the tools equipped to make a marriage work? Because it does require a lot. But
Yeah.
oh god. Okay. I want to talk about Heartthrob now because there aren't a ton of options in here. But I'm just saying, I mean, have you seen Dermot Mulroney's face? I just want to make sure we're watching the same movie. Have you seen his face?
Yeah.
Because it is perfect. It's absolutely beautiful. And I just feel like when he opens his mouth, like sexiness just drips out. And I just want him to whisper sweet, sexy little nothings in my ear. And I'm going to try to keep it PG for our listeners. But Dermot Mulroney is, like I said in the beginning, he's the object of every one of my desires.
I completely agree with you. He is just something beyond human. Like, truly, I adore him. I think I would take home George, though. I think he's a great friend, and
Yeah.
I've said it over. Like, I am like George's biggest fan in this. I think because I think he's like the only character who has like reason, and I don't know. He's there for her when she's pummeled by like her mishandled actions and after vulnerability, and he has like that amazing like '90s floppy hair that I just simply adore. So he's gorgeous. He'd be a great wedding date.
Yeah.
And he's a scene stealer, you know? He's a heart stealer too. And I mean, Dermot Mulroney, wow. But George, if I'm like really talking about characters here, like I'd be like, George, you and me, besties.
Yeah. Well, this is perfect then because we're about to play Marry, Smooch, Ghost. We just want to talk about who we're going to marry, who we'd smooch, and who we'd ghost in this film. So here are our three contenders. We have Michael, George, and then Paul Giamatti, who plays the bellman who smokes with Jules in the hall. And it's so funny because I feel like this is Paul Giamatti before Paul Giamatti. So
Yeah.
who would you marry, who would you smooch, and who would you ghost?
I'm marrying Michael, smooching George, and ghosting Paul Giamatti. Sorry.
Yeah, we are in alignment there, Mercedes.
Yes. I love when that happens.
I love when that happens too. Yes, it's very
Especially
rare.
in a movie like this.
Yeah. 100%. All right, guys, before we wrap it up, we always love to just bring in a pop culture moment. So it's actually funny because I was researching, I like to just Google people randomly.
Same.
And Julia Roberts has like so many properties, like houses around the world.
Yes.
And she said that her favorite is her ranch in New Mexico. And I thought of you, Mercedes, because you're in New Mexico. She said that's the place where she feels most herself. And I thought that was very sweet.
Yes, it's in Taos.
Oh, you know where it is.
Trust. Any celebrity who's connected to New Mexico at all, every New Mexican is like they went to middle school here. They did something here. Like we all know. So we all know Julia Roberts lives in Taos. Need to hit her up. Maybe she'll come on the pod.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Imagine. Oh my goodness. So there was actually a TikTok that went viral recently about this guy talking about how iconic the intro of this movie is, even though it's so unrelated to anything in the movie. And it's so true. Like, I love it. And I sing along and I do little dance and I pretend I'm one of the girls twirling around. And it's so amazing. And I love that it's still getting love now. Not just from us, but people on TikTok that like are like, yes, it's so good. And then people being like, what's this movie? I need to watch it. It's fun.
TikTok has a way of reviving old things. It's very funny.
I have another one. And if it's just everybody out there, if you're ever on YouTube and you need a fun, silly interview to watch the Dermot Julia Wired interview. It's amazing. It's hilarious. You see how good their friendship is and just how much they care about each other. And this came out, I think, like 4 years ago or something. So they're on like a 20+ year friendship because it started on this movie. So I just think that's so beautiful. And I don't know. I love them as a duo.
Yeah, they are pretty special and they are pretty epic. I love it.
Yeah.
But listeners, we want to hear your thoughts. What do you think of this movie? Do you feel like Jules is the anti-hero? Do you root for this movie? Do Michael and Kimmy last in 5 years? Let us know your thoughts. Slide into our DMs at Meet Cute. Again, I'm Kendra. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Ken10Hollywood.
Yes, and I'm Mercedes. You can find me at MercedesGV11 on Twitter, IG, and TikTok. And if you're looking for new rom-coms, follow Meet Cute wherever you listen to podcasts and follow Meet Cute on socials everywhere. Bye, everybody.
We'll see you next week.
Hi, Meet Cuties. We're so excited to let you know that you can now binge our newest series, Influence, exclusively and ad-free on Wondery Plus. It's Meet Cute's modern adaptation of Jane Austen's Persuasion, and we know you're going to love it.